So now the next topic is the transportation and deposition. Now I've already told you transportation means the movement of those finer sediments, not only the finer sediments, even the big boulders which has been done through the process of traction, suspension, sortation and the solution. Now when these sediments is being transported especially by the rivers, it gets deposited. It gets deposited in those areas where the river becomes very sluggish. Sluggish means slow. As it becomes very slow in nature, as it is not able to carry more load, finally this sediment is been deposited, especially on those areas where the river becomes very slow. Now if you look at this river, if you look at any river, a river has a three course. It has a three course. The first course is called as upper course. Clear? In the upper course, erosion is more active. There is only erosion. There is only erosion in the hills, in Kalimpong. Whenever the rainfall takes place, whenever the heavy rainfall takes place, you can see that the loose soil particles is being washed away. Clear? As it is being washed away, because we lie in the upper course, it means in the hills we find only the erosion. We find only the erosion because the volume of the water and the velocity of the water is very high in the upper course, resulting erosion throughout its life in the upper course. In the middle course, and the second is the middle course. The middle course means where the river flows from the hills and finally it starts to enter the plains. Now those areas is being called as the middle course. In the middle course, you find erosion and deposition simultaneously. It means the erosion is also there as well as the deposition is also there. But in the upper course, the erosion is only there. It means only the erosion exists. But whereas in the middle course, you find erosion and the deposition simultaneously. Clear? That the low course, it means the low course where the river is about to meet the ocean or the sea, out here the deposition takes place. Only deposition takes place because the river becomes very slow in nature. Okay, so let us continue with the landforms in the upper course. Landform in the upper course means the landforms which is being formed in the upper course by the river. First, gorge. When the down cutting by the river, becomes very high, it means when the down cutting becomes extreme by the river, especially in the hilly areas, it results in the formation of narrow and steep side valleys, resulting in the formation of gorge. Gorge is also been referred as eye-shaped valley. Now look at here, boys. Now if you take this as a path of the river, as it keeps on flowing, it erodes. It starts down cutting rather than the side cutting, resulting in the formation of a steep valleys. Clear? And after the formation of the gorge, the next is V-shaped valleys. V-shaped valleys are formed where the rocks are soft in nature. Clear? V-shaped valleys are formed where the rocks are soft in nature. Down cutting and side cutting is done simultaneously. Now here, what happens is that after the formation of gorge, when the down cutting and the side cutting becomes simultaneously, down cutting and the side cutting becomes simultaneously, then it results this gorge to be further eroded. the gorge to be further eroded, resulting in the formation of a V-shaped valley. Formation of a V-shaped valley. Next, waterfall. The waterfall comes into existence when the river falls from a sufficient height. When the river means when the course of the river or the path of the river, it falls from a sufficient height along the course of the river. Means whenever the river falls from a sufficient height along its course, that means along its path, that is called as a waterfall. Now whenever the waterfall comes into existence, the upper layer of the rock is always hard rock, because the hard rock is eroded, but it takes very long period of time for its erosion. Therefore, the upper layer of the waterfall has a hard rock, whereas the lower layer it has a soft rock. And whenever the river falls, or whenever the river water falls at a very high velocity, the base of the waterfall results in the formation of a plunge pool. It means it results in the formation of a pool which is being eroded by the falling of the water from a great height and resulting in the formation of a waterfall. Next is rapids. Now rapids comes into existence where there is a series of soft rock, hard rock, soft rock and hard rock at 45-degree angle. Now whenever the rocks is inclined at 45-degree angle, the river, this is the original course of the river which keeps on flowing. As the river keeps on flowing, it starts to erode its base. As it starts to erode its base, the soft rock gets eroded more quickly than the hard rock. The soft rock gets eroded more quickly than the hard rock, results in uneven slope of the river. So as it becomes uneven slope of the river, the water starts to jump. The water starts to fall downward. And as this hard rock is less eroded, this area becomes much more inclined. It becomes much more steeper, resulting the water to jump. So because of this erosion of the soft rock and the hard rock, because of the erosion of the soft rock more quickly and the erosion of hard rock very slowly, results in the formation of undulating surface. It means uneven surface on the base of the river, resulting the water to fall downward and the water to jump upward, resulting in the formation of rapids. And when a series of rapids is formed, the series of rapids are called cascade. It is called as a cascade. Next, landforms in the middle course. Landforms in the middle course of the river. The first one is the alluvial fan. Now, this alluvial fan comes into existence especially at the foothills, because I've already told you, as the river flows from the higher elevation and it enters the plain, those areas are called as the foothills. Now foothills, one of the best example out here is that after crossing Coronation Bridge or after crossing that place called as Bakpur. Now if you observe those areas is much more wider than the river Tista before crossing the Coronation Bridge or before crossing the Bakpur. Now those areas becomes much more wider as soon as you cross the Coronation Bridge. The reason is that those areas falls under the middle course. Clear? And not only that, those areas falls under the foothills. It falls under the foothills, and those finer sediments which is being brought down by the river Tista or by any river, it has been deposited on those flat land. And when these sediments takes a form of a fan, of a hand fan, that when the deposition takes place in the form of a hand fan, this deposition is called as a alluvial fan. And in alluvial fan, the sediments are sometimes coarse in nature, and sometimes sediments is much more very fine in nature, depending upon the velocity and the load of the river. Next, river meander and the oxbow lake. Now, first, what is river meander? Now, whenever, especially in the middle course, where the erosion and the deposition takes place simultaneously, the river forms a curved path. The river forms a curved path is called as a meander. Clear? Now, after the formation of the meander, the river becomes very sluggish, because what happens as the river is flowing along the curved path of the river course, as it flows along the curved path of the river course, the river becomes very sluggish. So as the river becomes very sluggish in nature, the upper course of the river is called as concave bank, and the lower part of the meander is called as the convex bank. Here in the convex bank, there is more erosion. Here there is more erosion takes place, whereas out here there is more deposition takes place on the convex slope. So due to the erosion on the concave side and the deposition on the convex side, due to continuous erosion and deposition, the river loses its meander. Means the river loses its curved path. As it loses its curved path, it forms a new path of the river which is much more straight and much more gentle, leaving behind leaving behind the lake, which forms in the shape of an ox. And sometimes this oxbow lake is filled with water, and sometimes it is dry in nature. And the surrounding areas of this oxbow lake is filled with the deposition done by the river on the convex bank of the river meander. Just remember, Oxbow Lake comes into existence because of the meander. Clear? Meander means a curved path of the river. Now, when the curved path of the river comes into existence, the concave side gets eroded, whereas the convex side gets deposited of sediments. Clear? So, due to continuous erosion in the concave side and due to continuous deposition in the convex side, results in forming a new course of river or a new path of a river, leaving behind the curved meander. That is called as a oxbow lake. And that particular left out meander is called as a oxbow lake. Next, river cliff. Now, river cliff means that river cliff comes into existence after the formation of meander. When the formation of the meander comes into existence, the concave side, where the erosion is much more higher, the concave side is much more steep. It is much more steeper, resulting erosional slope known as the river cliff. Next, slip of slope. The slip of slope comes into existence after the formation of convex side. Convex side means the depositional side. The convex side has a gentle depositional slope known as slip of slope. Next, landform in the middle course. The first one is the braided string. Now, braided string comes into existence especially in the lower course where there is continuous deposition. Now, those sediments brought down by the rivers is being deposited along the course of the river. As it is being deposited along the course of the river, the river water divides itself into numerous smaller channels. Means the river water starts to flow into different direction. And when the river water starts to flow in different direction, those change in the direction of rivers into smaller channels obstructed by the sediments deposited by the rivers. It is called as the braided streams. Next, natural levees and floodplains. Now, if you look at here, especially I just made a small sketch out here. Now, natural levees means the higher elevation. The higher elevation on the bank of the river. Now, these natural levees are sometimes natural or sometimes man-made. Clear? Now, these natural levees, the reason for the formation of natural levees is to avoid the surplus water to go towards the land or go towards the inhabited land. But what happens out there is that, especially this natural levees comes into existence in the lower course. In the lower course, it means deposition. So those fine sediments brought down by the rivers gets deposited along the bed of the river. So as the sediments gets deposited along the bed of the river, the water level it starts to rise up. And especially during the monsoon, when the volume of the water increases because of excess rainfall, this rainwater or the river water, it enters the surrounding areas. As it enters the surrounding areas, it results in the formation of drought, and those areas where it enters and those areas where the flood water enters, it is called as a flood plain. And the natural levees are the higher elevation. It means the land which has higher elevation compared to its surrounding areas along the banks of the river is called as the natural levees. And the flood plains means those areas where, due to the increase in the water level, where the water flows towards the inhabited area or towards the agricultural land, is called as the flood plains. Next, delta. Delta comes into existence especially at the mouth of the river. Mouth means where the river joins or enters the sea or the ocean. Now, whenever this river enters the sea or the ocean, the river water becomes very, very slow and sluggish. As it becomes very, very slow and sluggish, it starts to deposit its sediments along the course of the river. And not only that, the mouth becomes much more wider in nature. It becomes very, very wide. As it becomes very, very wide, it starts to deposit its sediments along the mouth of the river. as it starts to deposit its sediments along the mouth of the river, the shape of the sediments takes in the form of triangle. The shape of the sediments along the mouth of the river takes a form of a triangle. And this triangular feature of deposition of sediments done by the river along the mouth of the river is called as a delta. Now if you look at that, now how is it possible for the river to form the sediments into a triangular shape? The reason is that because the pointed part of the triangle is towards the flowing direction of the water. As the pointed part of the triangle is towards the flowing direction of the water, the sides of the triangle becomes smoothened, becomes eroded. It erodes, means less sediments is being collected on the sides of the delta, resulting in the formation of delta at the mouth of the river, resulting in the formation of delta in the lower course of the river. Next, drainage pattern. Now, this drainage pattern, I think is much more. I think this you learned in class 10, especially in the topographical map. But let us just go in brief. Dendritic pattern drainage system. Now, dendritic pattern means where it has tributaries. It has many tributaries, clear, and those tributaries is being compared with the roots of the plant. Clear? Means the roots of whenever we pull a plant from, especially from the ground or from the earth surface, you can see that there are numerous numbers of roots, and those roots is being compared with the dendritic pattern. Next, trellis drainage pattern. Now, in this trellis or the trellised drainage pattern, the tributaries joins at right angle. When the tributaries join at right angle, it is called as a trellised drainage pattern. And whenever the tributaries join the main river at a right angle, it looks like a rectangular in shape, and that is called as a trellised drainage pattern. Next, parallel drainage pattern. Now, parallel drainage pattern comes into existence when two streams flows to a certain distance and finally meet each other. When two different streams flows at least a certain distance and meets each other is called as a parallel drainage system. Next, radial. Radial drainage pattern means from where the water flows into different direction. It means from one point when the water starts to flow into different direction, that is called as a radial drainage pattern. Next, antecedent drainage pattern. Now, antecedent drainage pattern means those drainage or those rivers which existed before the formation of the Himalayas and which are still present even after the formation of the Himalayas. I mean, those rivers are called as the antecedent drainage pattern, and those rivers are the river Indus and the river Ganga. So, river Ganga and the river Indus is being called as the antecedent drainage pattern because these rivers used to exist before the formation of the Himalayas, and these rivers still exist even after the formation of the Himalayas. Therefore, they are called as the antecedent drainage pattern. This river Indus and river Ganga, during the formation, during the upliftment of the Himalayas, these rivers kept on headward erosion, lateral erosion and the down cutting, resulting in the formation of different relief feature found in the states of Uttarakhand, Uttaranchal, Himachal Pradesh, so on. Next, inland drainage rivers. Now, inland drainage rivers means those rivers which does not meet any sea or ocean, which disappears on its path, and as it disappears on its path, therefore it is called as a inland drainage pattern. One of the best example of inland drainage pattern in India is the river Luni. River Luni is found in the state of Rajasthan. Before it enters Arabian Sea, the river disappears. The reason why it disappears is because it has got plenty of sand in the Rajasthan. As it has got plenty of sand, this water seeps through the sand and it disappears in underground, not able to reach towards the sea or towards the ocean. So that is the inland drainage pattern. So these are the topics which you need to emphasize on this chapter, especially on the fluvial process and associated landforms. And whatever I have discussed, it has been discussed on the latest syllabus